Good afternoon to you. 406 here at News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. And boy, there's a lot of it. Philip Wegmann is going to be here this hour. We'll chat with him about what's going on in the 2024 race. You hear one of the candidates just fired his campaign manager. Things are getting interesting. Julie Kelly will be here at 5 o'clock. We'll talk to her about at least one federal judge standing up for the Constitution. And Greg Pemberton joins us, the head of the D.C. Police Union, at 5:30 as the city's leaders begin to say out loud that the crime may be a problem. You can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. I mentioned the GOP primary. One of the presidential candidates who's not going to win is Nikki Haley, and she did a radio interview this morning with host Hugh Hewitt, in which she criticized Senator Tommy Tuberville, one of a patriot, for his months-long hold on military promotions, questioning whether it represents a distressing low point in the nation's commitment to his armed forces, says Politico. Now, let me point out something about Politico's coverage here of this. They're not even telling you why Tommy Tuberville's holding the promotions in the first paragraph. They don't mention it at all. They don't mention it in the second paragraph. They've just decided to skip over it. They just acted like he's doing it for fun. Senator Tommy Tuberville decided he would stop military promotions just to have a grand old time. It's one of the things he does in his spare time. Haley telling Hewitt this morning, this just goes to show how messed up our country is. I mean, you look at the fact that the Department of Defense shouldn't be doing this in the first place, she concedes. But there's got to be other ways to go about doing this. I appreciate what Tuberville's trying to do. I do. Like, it's totally wrong that the Department of Defense is doing this. But have we gotten so low that this is how we have to go about stopping it? Haley, a former ambassador to the UN, the third paragraph begins, did not explicitly call for Tuberville to lift his blockade. She focused her criticism on the Department of Defense's handling of promotions and implementation of the Pentagon policy that pays travel expenses and offers leave to service members seeking an abortion. Quote, you're dealing with a Department of Defense that's not focused on making sure that our military has the equipment, ammunition up to date that they need. Instead, they want them taking gender pronoun classes, she said. She's right about that. We've got a serious problem when you've got China threatening us, Russia threatening us, Iran threatening us, and we're going to sit there and play games like this. Okay. But then Haley goes on. She said that dangling the promotions as fodder in a political maneuver could worsen military recruitment and morale. This is Tuberville she's now blaming for worsening recruitment for the military. Quote, I just think it shouldn't get to this point, she says. And you know, for my husband who's serving overseas, and for all those military men and women, the idea that this is what they're looking back at and seeing, and this is what they are dealing with on top of the stresses of keeping themselves safe and being away from their families, it's wrong. Okay, so what is Tommy Tuberville actually doing? Tuberville's been stopping. First of all, he's not fully blocking promotions. If they wanted to individually vote on each promotion in the United States Senate, they could do that very thing. He's denying them unanimous consent. This is one of those things where the Senate doesn't hold a vote. They just ask for unanimous consent. Everybody's like, okay, and there's no objections. They move forward. They do blanket promotions for everybody. And Tommy Tuberville's going, no, wait a second. You're taking American taxpayer dollars. You're killing babies with it. You're doing a abortion palooza in the military. And why are you doing that? So I'm going to put a break on just giving you carte blanche from now on until you stop aborting children with taxpayer money in the United States military. Capiche? Do you understand this? I don't think Tommy Tuberville says capiche. But the point stands. He's confronting them. He's like the only guy doing it, too. He's the only guy who's got the huevos to step up and say, stop it. Stop it. Stop meddling in your social, having all of these social wars that they're constantly pursuing. Stop it. Stop killing off these babies. Stop using American taxpayer dollars this way. How many decades have we had this conversation? Americans don't want their money being used this way. And so Tommy Tuberville's standing up for the right thing. And now he's got a woman who's running to be a nominee in the Republican primary saying that he's really harshing everybody's mellow. Come on. Oh, he's hurting recruitment. Please, who's hurting recruitment? That's Biden and the morons that surround him. They're the ones who are destroying military recruitment. They're the ones. You want to know why military recruitment sucks? Look no further than the Gold Star hearing we just heard yesterday out of California. You have families who are talking about the way they've been treated, the way that their service members were treated. And you're blaming Tommy Tuberville for standing up for them and standing up for life. Idiotic. Just idiotic. So that's what Nikki Haley is up to. Again, she's not going to win, but she's running for some reason. Meanwhile, a separate article over at Politico has caught my attention today. And now let's move to an area of the culture war where the right is defending itself and having some success. It's a headline: "A simple law is doing the impossible. It's making the online porn industry retreat." Online pornography is in retreat. Whoever thought you'd hear a headline like that? It says, on June 15th, 2022, a freshman legislator in Louisiana's House of Representatives accomplished something no other lawmaker or activist in the country could claim. She passed a law that is changing the online porn industry. If you think this was the result of a bitter culture war battle, Politico writes, think again. Quote, "Pornography is creating a public health crisis and having a corroding influence on minors," asserts the bill that State Representative Lori Schlegel introduced. Almost no one in the Capitol in Baton Rouge disputes the statement. The bill sailed through the Louisiana House 96-1 and the state Senate 34-0. The bill holds pornography websites liable unless the websites, quote, "perform reasonable age verification methods." In short, requiring users to show government ID to prove that they are 18 or older. Democratic Governor John Bel Edwards, no fan of the legislature's Republican supermajority, signed the bill about a week after it arrived on his desk. Quote, "I promise you he has no qualms about vetoing our bills," Schlegel told me. This is the Politico writer. In fact, earlier this summer, the governor had unsuccessfully vetoed a bill banning puberty blockers, hormone therapy, and elective surgery for minors, calling it so blatantly defective on so many levels. The governor of Louisiana, what that paragraph means, is in favor of child mutilation and would like to stop bans against it. But in this case, he signed on age verification for porn websites. That's it. Adults can go visit porn websites as much as they want. They just have to demonstrate that they're actually of age as they arrive. And it's not for the adults, it's to keep kids off of these websites because they are corrosive and destructive. So what has happened? Well, a number of states have followed suit, including one in our area, Virginia, Arkansas, Montana, Mississippi, Utah, Virginia, Texas have all passed nearly identical bills by those similarly lopsided margins. In Utah and Arkansas, the bills passed unanimously. The laws were passed by overwhelming margins in the legislatures controlled by both parties and signed into law by Democrat and Republican governors alike. In just over a year, age verification laws have become perhaps the most bipartisan policy in the country, and they're creating havoc in the porn industry. Creating havoc. So what has happened? Well, interestingly, the porn industry have decided to start pulling out of these states entirely. They don't want to bother with age verification. They're concerned about litigation. So now they've decided that they're just going to remove access entirely from those states. Boy, what talk about a major victory here. And all they did was pass age verification. That's it. Age verification in these states. In some of the states where these laws have been in effect for months, Pornhub, this major pornography website, did something even more unprecedented. It simply stopped operating, Politico said. Users in these states who attempt to visit the site are greeted with some sort of statement explaining the site's decision to pull out of the state. And they encourage people to contact their legislators. But look, this is a big deal. This is a big deal. The left has been quite obviously on the warpath to devalue human relationships for some time, haven't they? And look, this is just the reality. Pornography devalues human relationships, and it has seriously warping effects on children and their understanding of healthy relationships. And just the simple decision, I mean, what an amazing thing. The simple threshold of simply saying age verification, that's all, age verification, has led to these porn websites deciding it's not worth the hassle, and they're pulling out of these states entirely. Sorry, you don't have access there. Amazing. Just amazing. So if you were looking for some good news, we found it. We found some good news. Let us see here. Let's take a call. We've got Tom calling in from Vienna, line 1. Tom, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hi.
Hey, Tom. Go ahead, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you perfectly fine. Tom, you're on the air. Go ahead, sir.
As a retired military officer, is adultery still a violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice?
I believe it is.
Okay, so why is the Department of Defense paying for transportation costs to obtain an abortion? Are married people in the military getting abortions?
I don't know the data, but what you're suggesting to me, Tom, is what's going on here is these abortions are the product of out-of-wedlock adultery. And in other words, there's all sorts of other questions that are begged here, including why isn't the military enforcing its adultery laws?
Correct.
Yeah, it's a smart question. I don't know the answer. It has always been one of the fascinating things that the military does actually police that. It's a very different world than the one the rest of us live in. But adultery, it turns out, not so good for the troops, and they frown upon adultery, Tom.
If you and I were over a beer, I would be telling you many stories from the 80s and 90s where it was harshly enforced.
Yes. All right, Tom. Thank you very much. Tom raising an interesting point there. The military, as the Biden administration has decided, abortions for everyone is the new policy. And Tom's wondering, what about the old policies? What about the ones that were designed to maintain, some order and readiness that the military has had for a long time? All right, hold tight. I've got more for you coming up on what's going on in Washington, D.C. It turns out crime out of control, also our border out of control, to the point that we now have armed militants crossing it without any consequences whatsoever. The Democrat governor of Massachusetts, a woman called Nikki Haley, today has declared a state of emergency in her state, of course, over this, quote, surge of migrants, she says, has left her social services overwhelmed. That is, illegal immigrants pouring into the state of Massachusetts. Nowhere near where the border states are experiencing. The border states will have a good weekend that is considered a crisis in Massachusetts, based on the number of people that are just flowing into places like Texas and Arizona and elsewhere. But Haley, who is a Democrat, is saying that she needs the feds to step in. She, of course, needs more money, because that's always how these things go. And she said that the state of emergency now exists, quote, due to rapid and unabating increases in the number of families with children and pregnant people. Oh, my God. She said pregnant people. We need like some sort of alert for this stupidity. That would be women, pregnant people. Many of them newly arriving migrants and refugees living within the state, but without the means to secure safe shelter in our communities. The state says there are nearly 5,600 families, or more than 20,000 people, in the state shelter system. Again, that's a light weekend in the Rio Grande Valley. Haley said there are numerous contributing factors, including federal policies on immigration and work authorization, as well as a lack of affordable housing and the end of COVID-era programs. Oh, I see. So what they need is more COVID cash. If only. You know where they could send them? Do you know where all these Massachusetts illegal immigrants could go? Do you have any ideas? It's a little island we call Martha's Vineyard. It turns out the two who figured out that they could hide there, according to the New York Times, adore living in Martha's Vineyard. They are just having the best time ever. They can't believe their good fortune that they ended up in Martha's Vineyard. So you say you've got 20,000 in the state shelter system? I know a little island that could use some more illegal immigrants right there in your state. Problem solved. State of emergency over, baby. So the Massachusetts Democrat governor is saying, we've got a state of emergency. And the only answer is more federal government. I need more money from the feds. Man. And in case you were wondering what the border looks like for the border states, Bill Malugin, who is a great reporter over at Fox, he tweets today, quote, per law enforcement source, a group of suspected cartel gunmen with rifles and body armor were seen on cameras crossing illegally into the Fronton, Texas area of the Rio Grande Valley Saturday night. Elite Border Patrol BORTAC agents were called out and searched the area, but found nobody. The photos that he posts are from security cameras. They look like some sort of smart security camera that has tracking built in, so that there's little squares tightly on each of the bodies coming across the border through the bramble. And there's what are quite obviously military-aged males wearing backpacks and sneakers and jeans and backwards baseball caps, carrying long rifles across the border. We now have armed militants crossing our southern border into the United States of America. And this has been going on for some time, but here we have photos of this. You have some of these guys are really kitted up, full-blown ammo. Looks like bulletproof vests or some sort of tactical vest at least, multiple weapons coming across the border right into the United States of America. Malugin says Fronton, Texas is a heavy cartel area with significant drug smuggling. Border Patrol sources telling me armed gunmen are frequently encountered there. This was another group of suspected cartel gunmen who were arrested there in June, he points to, and again, armed military-age males pouring into the United States of America. And the media wonders why nobody's why nobody thinks Joe Biden's doing a great job. How come he's not getting credit for how wonderful everything is? I don't know. I saw a picture of a military-age male coming into the country with a long gun. Kind of seems like a problem. It's 429. Good afternoon to you. 435 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up, Julie Kelly is going to be with us at 5 o'clock. We'll talk to her about at least one federal judge standing up for the Constitution. That's some good news. And Greg Pemberton will be joining us at 5:30, the chairman of the D.C. Police Union, as one D.C. councilman is calling for the National Guard to come into the city to address the rise in homicides. Already so many murders just in the first few days of August alone. You can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Ron DeSantis is running for president as well, and his campaign is undergoing what they call a reboot. It's a euphemism for things aren't going correctly, so let's see if we can make them start going correctly. And he's replacing his campaign manager today. That's the news, firing the old one and elevating somebody else to that role. For more on this, I want to bring in Philip Wegmann. He is the White House correspondent for Real Clear Politics, and he joins us now. Philip, good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me, Vince.
Yeah, Ron DeSantis, there was a lot of hype around his campaign launch, but so far it's kind of been sputtering along. What's happening here?
I think that's a bit of an understatement. I mean, sputtering at least implies there's some type of forward progress. And what we've seen from the Florida governor is that he just hasn't lived up to expectations. He was seen as the guy who could meaningfully compete for the Republican nomination with President Trump. And thus far, he's made what seem to be numerous mistakes. He has not been able to run a campaign that is on his merits. Instead, he has been beset by questions about Trump. And I think that the most recent shakeup in the DeSantis campaign is a reflection of the fact that they do need to reboot. They need to change things, and they need to do it in a hurry.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, DeSantis is, I go back to his time as governor before he was running officially for president, and he had so much success as governor of Florida. He's got all sorts of deep policy insights, But then when you see him on the campaign trail, Philip, he's a bit awkward. The retail politics doesn't come anywhere near as naturally as it does for Donald Trump. It is a very different experience to see him out on the campaign trail trying to connect with people.
Mm-hmm. And to your point, Ron DeSantis is someone who he correctly dealt with the pandemic, according to a lot of conservatives. He did not have a Anthony Fauci type person down there who was pressing him to shut down or to close things longer than he should have. He's someone who, we just saw today that he can quote the Federalist Papers from memory. He is someone who I think a lot of conservatives who bought into this theory that you could have Trumpism without Trump were really hoping for. But, basically two things have happened, from my perspective in this Republican primary thus far. First, DeSantis has made some pretty significant blunders. There was the disastrous campaign rollout. There are difficulties with what video products are being put out and the controversy that came from some of those, a bunch of little nickel and dime things. And then meanwhile, at a moment when he would probably have to be perfect to take on and defeat a former president, Donald Trump is getting absolutely everything that he wants from the DOJ and that he has been indicted. And Trump, we've seen him run this playbook before, where he turns martyrdom into political currency. And the indictments, the sort of things that would bury other politicians, have helped him in the primary. I mean, Trump's own pollster, John McLaughlin, before the Manhattan indictment, he told me this is going to help us in the primary. And that has been the case. You can look at both these guys' numbers, and Trump is going up.
Trump said down. Friday. Trump did say Friday that he's just one indictment away from winning the presidential election. He recognizes that this results in people rallying to his cause, and that would be difficult for even like a really talented politician to run against. The reality here is that Donald Trump has a tremendous amount of a lead because people see correctly that he's being put upon by a corrupt system.
So, and the question that I have, and I think that we're going to get an answer to potentially if things don't change, is are these things helping him in the primary, and then do they hurt him in the general?
Right.
There's a pretty good theory of the case that right now there's a GOP MAGA voter who hears all of the criticism and says, I don't care about that. I don't care about what's in the indictments. There's a theory of the case that says that those voters are primed not to believe anything that the media tells them and not to believe anything that any institution like the FBI or DOJ tells them after the Russian collusion narrative.
Yes.
But do they rally to him during a general election? Or is this just the really plugged in primary voter? I'm not sure. We're going to find out. I will say, the DeSantis argument that he's the one who's more electable, that he's the one who can beat President Biden, it's difficult to make that argument when in head-to-head matchups, Trump is ahead of Biden by 1 or 2 points.
Yes. No, it's an excellent point. My theory of the case has been that the left, by controlling these institutions and using them against Trump, is attempting to very explicitly meddle in the election in the sense that it does help Trump in the primary. By this point, you'd have to be a complete moron not to recognize that this is an assist for Trump to get through the primary on top by a wide margin. But could it have the smearing effect of holding Trump back from a victory in 2024 in the general election? And that may be a part of the calculus here, Philip, that win in the primary, lose in the general by tarnishing his reputation.
And there are all of these arguments that are going to be available to President Biden, to Democrats, that just Republicans can't make. A Republican like DeSantis or Ramaswamy or Senator Tim Scott, they're not going to be able to go out there and say he's thrice indicted. He played fast and loose with election law on January 6th. We've seen Republicans make some of these arguments, most notably former Texas Congressman Will Hurd, who is very much a long shot for the nomination. He argued that Trump was basically running a campaign so that he could fundraise for his legal bills, and he got booed off the stage in Iowa.
Right.
So that's not a winning argument for Republican primary.
Yes.
But it's the kind of thing that a Democrat can say in a suburban area and peel off support away from the former president.
And on that legal funding portion, I feel like the media has in some ways turned this on its head. Or at least one of the talking points has, because another perfectly good assessment of the case is that what you're watching is Biden using his administration to drain Donald Trump's war chest. Donald Trump is running for president of the United States, and he has to expend endless resources on a legal defense in the midst of a presidential election. I'd say that's some pretty dirty play coming from the Biden administration.
Now, the Biden administration will say from the very beginning that they have stuck to this line, that the DOJ is an independent agency, that they have not directed the Attorney General to go after the former president. They try and keep as much separation as they can. But you can make all of those arguments. You can write those paragraphs and have them put in the paper of record.
Right.
But there's a very real impression in the minds of everyday voters that no, these institutions are taking it a step farther. The same voters who.
I'm sorry. I'll just add a bit of the thoughts I'm having as you're saying all of this. One is that we've seen multiple reports, including in the New York Times, that Joe Biden has expressed to people within the government that he wanted Merrick Garland to hurry up and prosecute Donald Trump for January 6th. So the idea that it was strictly independent is belied by the fact that even in the New York Times, they say that Biden has been placing pressure on this to occur. Secondly, in the Jack Smith case, we've got 3 people who are 2020 Biden donors who are on Jack Smith's team, not to mention Jack Smith's wife, who's a big Democrat donor and supporter herself. She made an entire documentary about how wonderful Michelle Obama is. I just think that the idea that Biden is independent of the Justice Department, in addition to just being false because he's the chief executive of the country, is, there's so much countervailing evidence, it's hard to say that with a straight face.
Well, so I don't disagree with anything that you've put forward. My point is only that they can insist that this is independent, but and I don't think you would disagree with me here, in the minds of voters who have seen some of the extracurricular activities of like a Peter Strzok or others who abused their institutional roles to put forward their own political preferences.
Yeah.
Despite any denial, in the mind of the electorate, the thought is, this is not just law and order. And frankly, we're at a point here where you have the Department of Justice both investigating a former president and investigating the current president's son. This is the sort of thing that leads to very little faith in institutions and gets to a dangerous place.
Yes, no, very much so, very much so. Now, we were talking about this Republican primary. We got some new numbers out of New Hampshire today, and it's amazing. So Donald Trump holds a massive lead in the Granite State, but Ron DeSantis is now tied with Chris Christie for second place. The two of them are in the single digits together, but Chris Christie tied in second place. Now, Christie's, correct me if I'm wrong, but this really is his strategy. He wants to focus on New Hampshire. My impression of Christie, though, as a candidate here is that he's a kamikaze, that he's coming in thinking he thought he could take out Trump. He hasn't really succeeded in taking away any support for Trump, but here he is, number 2 in the race alongside Ron DeSantis. What do we make of this?
Yeah, I'm not certain if the New Jersey governor is in this for a Benning's campaign or if he actually wants to take a shot at the nomination. The thing is, you can look at his numbers and then look at numbers of other folks who are in this race, like a Burgum, like a Hurd, like Haley and Hutchinson, and say, well, why are they doing this as well? If he did want to torpedo the former president, one would assume that moment would have to happen on a debate stage.
Right.
But we don't even know if Donald Trump is going to be on a debate stage and what ends up happening.
And I don't know even know how
writing.
Christie, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just don't know how Christie qualifies for the debate. Christie's, one of the stipulations that the RNC has put forward is that you have to support the eventual nominee. Christie has said outright that he won't support Donald Trump for president. So how does he end up on the debate stage?
Yeah, he has already said that. There's a lot of frustration among these candidates with how the RNC is dealing with their own debate rules, and that's a big deal if Christie isn't going to sign the loyalty pledge. We already saw Vivek Ramaswamy go to war with RNC over this exact issue of signing the loyalty pledge if his other demands weren't met. I think with Christie, what I think is so interesting is, history almost seems to rhyme here in, maybe he says he's going after Trump, but just like in 2015 and 2016, he didn't, cut Trump down at the wick. He knocked out Marco Rubio.
Yes, he did.
And perhaps this time he set up not to cut down Trump, but instead to take out DeSantis. And frankly, here you have Chris Christie, who isn't doing things that traditional Republican primary candidates do. I mean, do you remember the last time a Republican candidate for president decided to sit down with Obama's former speechwriters? When he decided to go on Pod Save America? This is it's rather befuddling.
It is. So let me help me understand what you think might be on the menu here in terms of Christie's decision making. You think that he's trying to suffocate some of the non-Trump candidates potentially?
I'm not certain if that's his intention. Only the governor can speak to his motives. But
right.
It's something that is actually happening. I mean, he might have as an objective denying the nomination from Trump, but the effect currently is much more of a drag on DeSantis, and New Hampshire would be the place for him to do it.
Right.
The New Hampshire media market is not so different from New Jersey. He's better known there than in Iowa. We saw him skip the Iowa cattle call that was put on by Vanderplat.
Yes.
It's a very interesting one to watch, but right now Donald Trump is up by, I think, 38 points in the Real Clear Politics average. It's going to be difficult to see how Christie or any of these other candidates running can even approach his numbers.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Christie, for what it's worth, I've met Christie a bunch of times, and he's a very talented politician, but that man is slippery. That man's a very slippery figure. I don't think I don't know anybody who thinks he's in this race to actually win it. He's got ulterior motives here, and among them, I think he thought maybe it's his ego speaking, that he was going to take out Donald Trump. I don't even see that happening on that debate stage. No matter how clever Chris Christie is, and the man's capable of being clever, I don't think Trump's too big of a force. It's not going to happen. But maybe I'll be wrong. We'll see. In the meantime, Philip Wegmann, man, thank you very much for your time as always, sir. Yeah, we are just a couple of weeks away from the first presidential debate for the Republican primary. That's August 23rd in Milwaukee. Fox News and Young America's Foundation doing that. Now, I'm looking at this, and I'm wondering, first of all, and I also want to give some credit to Mark Levin, because he's the one who reminded me of this. I saw his tweet earlier about this. Christie has said he's not going to support Trump if he's the nominee. So how does he get into the debate? One of the requirements is that you have to support the eventual nominee. So how does Chris Christie get in? That's one. Two, if he does get in while violating the rules, that sort of tells you what's going on at the RNC, doesn't it? So if you are in violation of one of the qualifiers to join the debate, and yet they let you in anyway, that means somebody is playing favorites. Somebody wants Chris Christie to be on that stage at the RNC. And for what reason? Well, what is the entire MO of Christie's campaign? It's to be the Kool-Aid man and to smash through the walls of Donald Trump's campaign. He's a kamikaze. He wants to destroy Trump. And so somebody at the RNC, if he qualifies for this thing, or if he's allowed in without qualifying, somebody wants Trump to be taken down. That's what that tells me. Somebody wants Trump sabotaged. So that's kind of a crazy storyline that's developing here. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But that the debate only a couple weeks away. Now, Trump may skip it. Trump has flirted with skipping it entirely. And honestly, whatever Trump chooses, it'll be a win for him. People will say, well, he's too big for that debate. Perfect. Or he gets in there, he mixes it up. There's a real chance for him to demonstrate he's still got the chops. He's ingesting other people's ideas. Personally, I want to see him on that debate stage because I feel like as a Republic, as voters, we're entitled to see these guys mix it up. And, to the victor go the spoils. Go for it, Donald. Be on that stage again, man. You know how to do it. It's 4:58.